Hello, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Paul, and I'm joined by Ian and Ken. And today we're going to talk about Google ranking signals. You do a quick search, and you'll find all kinds of articles and advice out there telling you that there are like 200 variables that Google uses that can affect how a web page ranks. But there's a huge difference between what might impact SEO and what is actually a confirmed and proven ranking factor. And there's also best practices that should be followed, but that doesn't necessarily translate into that being a Google ranking factor. So when you're doing SEO or looking for an agency or a company to do it for you, it helps to know what's important, because if they're telling you that something needs to be done on your website because it's a ranking factor and it's not, then you're just kind of wasting time and money. So uh, no way we're going to get through everything in this episode. We might have to revisit it in another podcast in the future, but let's dive in. So, Ken, start with you. Core Web Vitals, what are they, and are they a ranking factor?
Yes, they are a ranking factor. As a matter of fact, they've become a really important ranking factor over the last 2 years or so. Core Web Vitals are a set of metrics that measure user experience, um, especially loading pages and how somebody might interact with a page. So it's really driven around the user experience. Some of these metrics include load performance, like how fast does a page load, both on a desktop and as well as on a mobile. And there are there's some things that you might see if you dig into this, like time to first paint or time to first paintful content that are indications of how fast your page is loading. Interactivity and also visual stability are what round out those metrics. So it's important because it really does look at the overall user experience. Um, like I said, Google really put a premium on mobile first indexing, and these core web vitals really are a critical component to that. So everybody needs to be paying attention to this. There are a lot of websites that are out there that are built with two huge culprits that slow down web load performance. Most people upload the biggest file size they can of a picture because they think that it needs to be like super high res. Guess what, folks? It doesn't need to be. As a matter of fact, it's killing your page load speeds. And the second thing is you load up way too many scripts when you first load and launch your website. So there are smarter ways to do that by like using Google Tag Manager, or even cutting down on the number of scripts that you have because you've got a lot of bloat on your website.
The one that always makes me laugh with that, Ken, I don't know if you found this as well, is that Google's own scripts are like the worst culprits I find. Like so it's a common practice to use embedded YouTube videos on a website. That's done a lot, but it is notorious for slowing down the loading of your website.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, if you're, especially on your homepage, if you're going to put a video on your homepage, and that's not necessarily a bad idea, but make it short and compress the video.
Well, it's actually a good idea to have a video on your homepage.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Ian, URLs. This has been around for a long time. Whether it's the domain name itself for your business, uh, what the URL is for a page or a blog post. Uh, is that a ranking factor, or is it just a good idea?
So some of my answers today are going to go against things that Google has actually come out and said they are or they aren't ranking factors. Because I think one of the interesting things is, um, so Google, nobody knows what Google algorithm is actually looking at except what Google reveals a little bit of, and they do reveal a little bit now and again, but it changes all the time. But I would say even more important than what sometimes Google says they're doing or not doing is the anecdotal evidence of the mountains of data that SEO experts have and data aggregators have. And so when we're talking about this, Google has come out and said, and by Google, I mean there's a few subject matter experts at Google that are very highly regarded, and I highly regard them as well. But I've actually seen them say stuff, and then it actually doesn't necessarily turn out to be true, or maybe it was true for a period of time and wasn't true again. So
Sometimes they contradict themselves.
They contradict themselves. But I would say this is true. Let me first explain what this is all about is about using keywords within your actual URL, the address of your website and your web pages and your blog posts. And this has been a standard practice for SEO experts for years. Like since SEO began as a science and an art, this has been true. And it's been true because it's actually been proven to actually affect your rankings, regardless of what has been said. So Google's always playing with stuff. So I would say on two fronts, Google says it's not a ranking factor. I would say anecdotally, it's absolutely a ranking factor. And it's a best practice because you want your URLs to actually make sense to what people are looking for. So I think it's contextually relevant. And so, I don't know if that helps people, but I would suggest stick with best practices because they've proven to move the needle in the right direction. But yeah, we all pay attention to what Google says, and we have to take it into what we're doing as well. I wouldn't put enormous amounts of energy on this, and I would certainly be very, very careful when creating redirects or changing URLs to make them more SEO valuable, because that is a common practice that sometimes comes up. And if you're not careful, you can actually break some of your rankings.
Yeah, I wouldn't change URLs for the sake of changing URLs, because then, like you said, now you have to go do redirects. And one thing Google always says is relevancy matters. Well, if relevancy matters, then shouldn't your URL be relevant? Seems to me.
Yeah. Well, here's an example. So this is where I feel like sometimes they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, if that's an expression we can use. So when
I have another one we could use.
When you're optimizing, like if you follow Google's best practices for Google Ads, and when you're actually creating an ad, you give it a URL. Like you're telling it this is the URL, and they actually tell you to make the URL relevant to the search. So if they're telling you that in Google Ads, and we learn an awful lot in the SEO world about how Google ranks, even though they're different algorithms, it's still Google, and it's still part of the overall search methodology, that if they do that in Google Ads search, I would suggest that it's probably relevant to some degree. It might not be a huge ranking factor, but it's relevant, and it's a best practice that you should employ.
That's a great point.
Yeah, definitely. So, Ken, we hear a lot about alt text, and there's a lot of articles saying that this is a ranking factor, but has Google ever actually said that alt text is a ranking factor?
Well, I think it's important, people may not be familiar with alt text. You may have heard alt tags, alt attributes, alt descriptions. Basically what this is it's a description, a short description in HTML of what the image is on the website, because the search engines can't tell what the image is. They can only read the alt text of what you tell it that it is. So yeah, we don't really know, but what we do know is that it does play a role in web accessibility. It helps people who need to use a screen reader, for example, know what that image is. We also know that the images, they should be relevant. The alt tags the alt text that you're putting on the images need to be relevant to the image itself. And in some cases, if it's literally just decorative, you still should have an alt text, but you can leave it blank. But yeah, I mean, I think from a user experience perspective, uh, it's just the right thing to do, and it's a good thing to do. It does no harm, and if it actually helps a little bit, it's pretty simple to do, and it's pretty easy to do. It's a really common mistake that I think a lot of people make by just uploading a picture. They get sloppy. They upload a picture. They don't care about the file size. They don't put alt text in there. To me, it's a missed opportunity, and it's just sending signals to Google that you don't give a damn about your website. And if you don't give a damn about your website, the person that's owning it and maintaining it, why would Google want to rank it? So, so yeah, I think you just do it. And like I said, it should be relevant. And to the extent that it reinforces the content, the written content that you have on your website, I think that's even better.
Yeah, and those are a couple good points there that from the accessibility standpoint, yeah, it definitely relates to user experience, which Google says user experience is a ranking factor. So
Right.
even if alt text isn't a direct ranking factor, it's probably an indirect ranking factor.
Right.
And the other thing you said about, about when they upload pictures, they'll take a picture off their phone or get it from whether it's Adobe stock that they pay for or whatever, and they don't change the file name.
Right.
And your file name is IMG underscore a string of 50,000 numbers.
Right.
So that's another good point, is when you upload a picture, make the file name relevant because that helps, because Google sees that.
Right. And the file name doesn't equal the alt text. Although
Correct.
I mean, you can make the file name and the alt text the same. There's no problem with that. But again, I don't want to give, as an SEO professional, I don't want to give Google any reason to question the quality and care that we're providing of a website. And if you don't add alt text, and you're just leaving Google to make an assumption that maybe you don't care, and I just don't think you want to do that. It's such a simple, easy thing to do, and like I said, it's really important for web accessibility. I mean, if you're going to try to have a web accessible website, which 25% of the population in North America have some kind of disability that limits their ability maybe to use and consume a website. Why would you take that risk? I mean, it's just sloppy, lazy.
The thing too to remember is that Google absolutely crawls images, right? Like, if I'm looking for an image of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or the Eiffel Tower or whatever, how does Google know that that's a photo of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or the Eiffel Tower? Well, it's because either the file name tells it is, the title of the image within the HTML, the alt text, or perhaps a caption, or the metadata, right? Like, there's all these levers you can pull, and it would be silly not to pull those, because even though it's never been confirmed as a ranking factor to do alt text, just what you said, Ken, like, why would you leave money on the table or opportunity on the table to show up in searches, potential searches? And if Google's crawling them to find what the meaning of a photo is, you can darn well bet that there's interconnectivity between those photos, those searches, and the website that's holding them, right? So it adds value to it for sure.
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, Google owns 92% or so of search traffic.
Yeah.
Not all of that is text-based.
Yeah.
Maybe 60 some odd percent is text-based. The bulk of the rest of it is going to be coming from Google image searches and YouTube searches, all of which Google owns. So again, if you're not doing alt text, you're just making it harder for Google to index those pictures, which may be the result that helps somebody get to your website in the first place by finding an image.
even photos on your Google Business Profile, right? Even though you can't do alt text in those, your descriptive text is
Right.
similar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And your file name.
Yep.
So details matter.
Content matters.
Yes, it does. So, Ian, click depth. This relates to website structure or architecture, as it's called, and all the while this was all the rage a little while back, and everyone said you had to have a flat website architecture to make it better for Google. So, what does it mean to have a flat website structure, and is it really important? Is click depth important?
Yeah. So I think it's important from a couple different directions that you come at it from. One is it's not a significant ranking factor that we can tell from Google, right? It is a ranking factor, but not a significant one. But it goes back to what you guys have been talking about, which is user experience. And if you're so click depth, first of all, just to give people an example, say I'm searching for a particular type of Nike shoes because I love their shoes and I want this particular pair, and I get a search result that takes me to a website, but it doesn't take me right to those shoes for some reason. And so I start to look around on the website and it takes me like 8 clicks to find the shoes. From a user experience standpoint, that's horrible. It took way too long to do that. Ultimately, I should have been able to just type in the particular ones I was looking for into a search box, or do a drill down in the menu really quick and find them, right? An expandable menu. Because the ultimate goal is to get people to the content they're looking for as quickly and as easily as possible. So I think from a user experience standpoint, click depth is absolutely vital. Where it gets weird is that Google actually cares about how long people stay on your website, right? So you could even make the case that, hey, when I make it hard to find, they stay on my website longer. But it creates a horrible user experience, which is the ultimate goal that Google's trying to get to. So you really, you have to be smart about it. You have to make it easy for people to find, and this is definitely something that web designers and kind of web architects should be paying attention to when they're building the website, but also when they're optimizing it for search.
That's a good point you made about the dwell time versus the user experience. And I didn't include it in any of these questions. Maybe I'll talk about it a little bit right now, is internal linking. You can use that to keep your click depth shallow and use internal linking within your pages and blog posts, because Google tries to crawl your website the way a person would navigate it. So if you have a link to a page or a post on your navigation, and this goes back to hub pages, which I also didn't talk about because there's just too much to go through, but that's the whole idea of a hub page, is to keep that structure relatively flat. You have your hub page, and that links out to all these other different articles. So you keep your click depth relatively shallow. And so to your point, that was a good point, but that use internal linking in hub pages to solve that problem. So something else, Ken, that we hear about a lot is anchor text. What are we anchoring? Okay. I mean, what is it, and is it important? Has it changed over the years? I know in the past it was really important.
I think it's the hidden gem for SEO for a lot of people. And something that, again, people are lazy with and they don't do. So yeah, it is important.
What is it? What is anchor text?
Yeah. So
maybe I should have started there.
Well, I'll get to that here.
Okay.
So yes, it is important for SEO. So what is it? It's the visible, clickable text that you decide to hyperlink to take to either an internal page or an external page. And it's, it's usually it should appear underlined so that it's obvious as a link. Otherwise you Google can tell it's a link, but you also want to make it easy for user experience for people to realize that it is, a clickable link. So it's often a different color and often it's underlined. What you decide to use as the anchor text itself, meaning the words that you want to make clickable to go to another web page on your site or an external website, is important. But you want to mix it up because you don't want to fight yourself. You don't want to compete with yourself. So you can use the naked URLs in some cases. In some cases, you want to use a phrase that, if that happens to be a keyword phrase that's important for, for what you're trying to be found for on your website, then that's a good idea. It never should be misleading. You don't want to fool people by creating, having something that's hyperlinked on your website with that text and then taking them to a misleading place. That's bad. So yeah, I mean, and you don't want to overuse the same phrases over and over and over again. And like you just talked about, Paul, I mean, from a site architecture perspective, and the concept of a hub page, a pillar page, skyscraper page, whatever you guys may call it, that's where you're going to use a lot of these to click out to internal pages on your website to build out and reinforce the concept of what your hub page is all about, through additional long tail keyword phrases, and as well as, some raw naked URLs, but also linking out to external authoritative websites, on those pages. So yeah, you don't want to overuse any particular phrase. You don't want to make any of this artificial. You don't want to overuse it. You don't want to kind of stuff these into a page just because you think that's going to be better. It needs to be natural. And the whole thing is, how can you provide that user experience to help somebody find the content that is important to them based on the intent and the reason that they're using the page or your website in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good point about mixing it up and not overusing things, because you see that a lot. And because with Google, it's not a person, it's an algorithm that could it could be misinterpreted as keyword stuffing, which you alluded to,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is not a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, if you put, St. Louis plumber, I don't know why we always use plumbers as examples, but St. Louis plumber, 5 times hyperlinked throughout the course of the web page, that's a really obnoxious user experience.
Definitely, it is. Ian, eat, not dinner, but
I'm hungry.
EAT. What is it? What does it mean? And does Google, is it more important in certain industries or professions than others? Does Google weight it differently?
So EAT is an acronym, and it refers to expertise is the E, A is authoritativeness, and T is trustworthiness. And it's really a framework that Google abides by, at least currently, when assessing websites. And it's essentially an amalgamation of many different ranking factors. And you want your website to show expertise. Let me just walk through each of those, because I think it'll unpack it a little bit. But you want your website to show expertise on the topics that you're trying to rank for, of course, but that are important to your audience. So the people that you're trying to connect with and attract, it needs to present your business as an expert in that field. And really the way you do that is through content. It's through different things like social proof, through reviews, through associations you're connected with. Even backlinks can be a part of that, but they also play parts in other things. And that's why this is really an amalgamation of different factors. And then you want to be perceived as an authority. And so to be an authority, you have to provide, again, valuable information on the topics that your website's trying to rank for. Ideally, you're going to get backlinks to your website from authoritative websites, or websites where people end up when they're looking for that topic as well. are do you so imagine if you're a regular person on a news show, right? In a particular, and you talk about SEO ranking, or you talk about home improvement or something like that, right? Getting that kind of link power from the news website, super powerful, because they have a high authority rating in the world of search engine rankings. And then trustworthiness, I already mentioned, reviews. That's super important. Social proof, even just the validity again of the information that you're sharing. So if you share all kinds of stats and they are totally different than what Google's finding on authoritative websites, where you would actually gather information about those stats, then that could be a trustworthiness red flag for Google. And really, all you're trying to do as a business building a website is to get all of the green flags going up for the expertise, authority, and trust. And when you get all those working in concert, which is what Google's looking for, they see that as, first of all, are you relevant? And they want to send traffic to you because you're doing the things that they want you to do. I've always said that Google loves Google. So when you can do the things that Google wants you to do, you're going to win the game in showing up for Google rankings. The last question you asked, I actually don't know the answer to this, Paul. So I'm curious if you can jump in, or Ken, about whether Google looks differently at different industries. I know for sure from a search engine ranking standpoint, like it's much easier to fall into the bad books with Google if you're in a particular industry, because the scrutiny that they put on those industries is far higher. But from an EAT perspective, I'm not sure. So I'm curious what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, Paul, you're probably talking about your money, your life kind of
stuff. Google has, at the very least, alluded to the fact that they do weigh it differently. And for instance, actually, I think there's two different angles to this. From a user experience, or from a user standpoint, someone looking at it, if you're looking for a painter, you're going to, for you, it matters. You want to make sure, whether it's painter, roofer, plumber, you want to make sure that you're dealing with a reputable company, that they're not going to rip you off, and that they're going to do a good job. So, but from Google's standpoint, what they care about, like I said, they've alluded to this, they've never actually come right out and said it, but they do weigh it differently, because if you're in the financial industry, you can destroy someone's life. Yeah. But if you're a painter, if they do a bad job, they do a bad job. Take them to court, whatever. But yes, they have alluded to the fact that they do weigh it differently depending on the profession. And if you're in, goes back to what Ken said, your money or your life. If you're in the financial industry, if you're an attorney, what's that?
Healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Google is going to put a lot more weight on that than if you're, say, a home service provider of some sort.
Yep.
At least that's what I've read.
Yeah.
Ken, anything to add to that?
No, I think that was good.
So back to you, Ken. Headings, we hear about them all the time. I mean, so explain a little bit about what that means and the way it relates to a website, and are they a ranking factor? And if so, how does Google use them as a ranking factor? Why do they matter?
Yeah. So the header tags, headings, whatever you want to call them, again, they're HTML. If you've been doing SEO for any period of time, it's probably been ingrained in you that the title, the header, the meta description, all of those things that, are important HTML content that you need to add to your website from an SEO perspective. So it really, if you read a magazine or a newspaper article or a case study, you'll notice that there's the title, and then there are a lot of subheads, and then there are subheads to help organize the flow of the information of the content. Again, it's a user experience thing. Well, that's important when you put that on a website, as well as whether it was in print media. So you want to set up the structure of the content on a page, following the proper headers. For one, it helps Google consume it. Two, it helps humans scan and because look, people are busy. They don't often have time to read an entire web page. I would ask yourself, when is the last time you've read every word on a web page? If you've got an emergency situation, you're going to scan that page until boom, you see the piece of information that you need to say, okay, this is a company I need to call to help me in this situation, whether it's a traffic ticket, whether it's flooding in your basement, whatever it might be. People scan websites. Well, the scannability is helped when you use the proper H tags. And so you're going to have H1, H2, H3, maybe H4 and H5, maybe even all the way down to H6, depending on how long and comprehensive the page is. It's critically important for both SEO and for readability because it does provide that hierarchy. It gives you the ability to kind of be inclusive in the semantically relevant content that that needs to prop up the overall valuableness of any particular piece of content that you write. So yeah, I would say a big mistake a lot of people make is they use too many H1s. You should only have one H1. And that H1 is hugely important from an SEO perspective. It serves as the meta title. I think the best practice is your H1 and the meta title of your page should be consistent with one another as much as possible. And then the H2s, the H3s give you the opportunity to really just kind of build out important information around what that main header is all about. And keep in mind the H1, it's your headline. It's the thing that's going to catch people's attention to say, does this solve my problem? And so, yeah, it's absolutely critical. Google wants to know, is that content going to help solve somebody's problem, as well as the users, and from a user experience, they want to know that. So critically important.
And Google's actually, their algorithm changed, what was it, a year or two ago, where they started to look at H1 tags and actually use those in place of your SEO title or SEO description. That kind of became, I don't know where it's at right now, because we've seen it kind of waffle, and it depended actually where you were in geographical area where that was being implemented sometimes. Right. But it showed the importance of H1s for sure.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Google can do whatever the hell they want.
Yep.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Nope.
So this Ian, this one might be a little technical, but HTTPS, what is it? What does that mean? And does Google take it into account? Is it a ranking factor? How important is it to Google?
So simply put, because I'm not going to get very technical here, but simply put, it's the technology that secures the connection between the website you're viewing and your computer. So it's trying to secure that connection so that like you can't be hacked or anything like that. And it absolutely is a ranking factor, but even more than that, it's a trust factor. So a few years ago, when Google kind of switched this on in their algorithm as being a ranking factor, I don't know if you guys remember, but if you were a Chrome user, holy cow, like it would, if you went to a non-HTTPS page, it would pop up with this message, like basically you are in desperate danger, leave this website, right? And so for companies that hadn't switched over, it was terrifying. They were like, oh my goodness, we've just lost all this traffic because Google's putting up this horrible message.
Oh, they still do. It'll say
do, but it's more it's more subtle though, right? So like you can still go to an unsecured page, and sometimes you'll get a message from Google, sometimes you won't, I find. But you will always see up in the address bar, you'll see a lock next to the URL, the address of that web page, and it'll either show a lock, which is now more subtle. It used to be a green lock, But you will see it unlocked and in red, I believe, in the current update, anyways, of Google Chrome, and other browsers show something similar. So it's a huge trust factor, and it should be, right. Like it's not a hard thing to do, to implement HTTPS on a website. So businesses that aren't doing it and haven't done it yet, they really show that, first of all, they're not serious about their online presence, or secondly, they don't care. And both of those are really negative vibes that you're sending out to people online.
And again, it just goes back to giving Google a reason. I don't believe you want to give Google any reason to question
Right.
how much you care about your own website. If you don't care about it and you don't maintain it and you don't do all of the right things, then why would Google want to rank you and present and use up some of its valuable reputation as delivering quality search results?
Yeah.
You just don't want to do that.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed is, well, it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. And back to what you were saying, Ian, about the page popping up, what I've noticed is that if it's the first time you've gone to a website that isn't HTTPS, you'll get a page that says your connection isn't secure and you have to click on advance and you can still go there. Well, now it's cached in your browser because Google caches everything just to cause problems. And if you go to that same web page again, you won't get that message.
Right.
Is what I've noticed. And I've also seen it happen where it says it's HTTPS, but you'll get that message from Google, and that's probably caused by an HTTP page being redirected to an HTTPS page, because when you redirect from a non-secure page to a secure page, that pretty much negates, in Google's eyes, the benefits of HTTPS. So
Right.
I've seen that as well.
Right. And we would call that in the industry mixed content, right? There's mixed content on your website, some secure, some not secure. Which
Yeah, that's one form of mixed content, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can happen with internal links. That's God, you could do a whole podcast on that. So we'll stop there. So Ken, local citations. There's a lot of mixed information about this. I mean, is it a confirmed ranking factor? And if it's not, why bother?
Yeah, I don't know that it is a confirmed ranking factor, but I think it's, again, very important because, we're in the world of SEO today, it's all based around signals. And, as Ian talked about, expertise, authority, and trust. So this, citations can do a lot in the trust realm. If information about your business is incorrect on directory sites, which is what, is a large source of citations, you're giving the search engines and you're giving people a reason to question the trustworthiness of your business. So citations can come from, directories, social media platforms, or other business listing type sites. Generally, you might hear this phrase: name, address, phone number, NAP, as we also call it, as an acronym. I still think it's a best practice to get this to be consistent across as many of the important directories as you can across the web. It just sends important signals, and signals are a cumulative kind of thing. So individually, does one directory, does it carry a lot of weight? Maybe, maybe not. Some more than others. Not every directory is going to carry the same amount of weight. But if you do look at the directory, domain authorities, some of them are quite hefty. And so why do you want to let an important, in the eyes of the search engines, an important, trustworthy directory site have bad information about your business and inconsistent information? The other big citation that you really need to think about is your Google Business Profile. That is it is, and arguably it may be the most important, probably is the most important directory. And so you want to make sure that that information is accurate and up to date and consistent with your website. And when you're looking at Google Business Profile optimization, you're looking at relevance, expertise, authority kinds of things again. But you know, I mean, it's also going to be bounded by proximity and prominence, which is driven largely around reviews. A lot of these directories and a lot that create these citation signals, they are also review sites. And so if people can write online reviews, and it's not only going to be on your Google Business Profile, it could be on, industry specific review sites. If you're an attorney, it could be Avvo. If you're a realtor, it could be realtor.com or Zillow. If you're in the medical practice, there are going to be a whole series of, directories where people can also go write reviews. It all sends signals. So yeah, I think it's important, and I'm pretty confident, and I view it as very much important from an SEO perspective, especially local SEO, because these directories are providing information about, again, your name, address, phone number. So if you're trying to rank for plumber near me or plumber plus, a location, could be a suburb, it could be a neighborhood, it could be a city. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, I think it's what we would refer to as an indirect ranking factor, because it goes back to what you said about trust. If you've been in business for a while and you have your business is on these different citations, these different listings, and you have 2 different addresses and 3 different phone numbers, and that's a trust issue. Even with Google, they're like, which one's correct? So
Right.
like you said, it's definitely important, and it's probably at the very least an indirect ranking factor.
Well, it's also important from the human element too, because if you happen to find information on one of these directory sites, and it could be your Google Business, a Google Business Profile that you find, and somebody's hours are incorrect, and you drive 20 or 30 minutes to go to someplace only to find out that, hey, you know what? They're not actually open like they said they were.
Yeah.
Are you ever going to get another chance with that business? Maybe, maybe not.
And you could get a 1-star review,
Yeah,
which is a whole nother problem.
that's right.
So, Ian, I'm going to group a few things together here because it's something that we hear a lot about. I think a lot of the information out there about it is wrong, but bounce rate 404s and AMP, what are they, and does Google really care about them? Does Google use them as a ranking factor?
Yeah. So the first one you asked about is bounce rate. And that's the percentage of times that visitors come to your website and immediately leave, right? It's not like they look around and then leave. It's pretty much an immediate leaving of your site. Google says this isn't a ranking factor, but to me, it's a huge red flag, right? As a developer, a website developer, when you see high bounce rates in your SEO, or more importantly, if you're doing advertising and you see high bounce rates, that is a massive, huge red flag that something is seriously wrong. And I'm highly suspicious that Google doesn't pay attention to that, right? If they send traffic to your website and people immediately bounce, because again, going back to the analogy of looking at both Google Ads and Google Search, on Google Ads, it's huge. Like your quality score goes down immediately and precipitously if your bounce rate is high, because to Google, it's a signal saying, hey, we're first of all showing your ad. People are clicking on your ad, so it's resonating. But then when they go to that page, whatever they're seeing does not resonate with the ad that we presented them with, the description that they saw, and what they clicked on. And so to Google, that's a big red flag from an ads perspective. And again, anything we see in ads, it's applicable in search to some degree as well. So again, Google says it's not a ranking factor. I'm suspicious it's a ranking factor. I'm probably, when we get this podcast transcribed, I may be blacklisted by Google. I hope not. I love Google. Google, you're awesome. 404s. So 404s is a code that pops up. Everybody's probably seen it. You might not remember it, but if you've gone to a web page or even clicked on a search ranking result, been sent to a web page, and it's like 404 error, we can't find this page. Some of them are funny, but most of them are just canned 404 pages. But this is a broken link. This is a broken page or a broken link to your website. Again, this is the weirdest one. Google says it's not a ranking factor. Again, it's got to be. Like, it's a huge user experience issue.
Right.
And anecdotally, again, from all the data, the mountains and mountains of data that we've seen over the years, it's a huge ranking factor, because Google doesn't want to send, first of all, if it's a direct link from search and they're sending you a broken page, that goes against the whole EAT principle, the framework, right? So regardless of what they've said, like, you got to clean up those broken links, the broken buttons, the broken pages, the interlinking, even even when you're linking out to other websites. That's a really common. So yes, internal linking is a big problem we see in websites that we help clients with. But then the external linking, like even with blog posts we've written for clients years ago, like if they've been a long time client, we have systems that monitor for broken links. And even really high level authoritative websites that we're linking out to, like for a dentist, it might be a dental association, right? Even those links get broken sometimes, because the dental association, like, everybody updates their website, redesigns it every 3 to 4 years at the least. And so when they do that, sometimes they restructure their URLs and stuff gets broken. And so it should be a common practice, because you don't want to give a bad user experience. So again, that's one I would say is a ranking factor. AMP, AMP, again, is an acronym, and it stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. And I don't remember what year this came in, but it was kind of all the rage for a while, because Google cared about it. And it was kind of in that time when, especially mobile devices did not have, they didn't have the fast data that they do today. And I think that's why Google doesn't care about it anymore. But what it was a way of stripping a web page, taking out all the graphics, and basically creating a super fast version of a text version of that web page that could load very quickly and get people to the information they needed. It wasn't a very nice user experience, because who just wants to see, it's like looking at just the body copy from a newspaper, right? Like that's not really very compelling. But at the time, it was a way to overcome the hindrances of low data speeds for mobile devices. I mean, today with 5G, and they're talking 6G now, I mean, that stuff is so fast. It's almost faster than your internet connection at home. Sometimes it's just, it's there. So, yes, everything still needs to be mobile optimized, but AMP is not I'm curious what you guys think, but I haven't seen it talked about except in a form of, like, why would I bother investing in kind of a second version of my website when I can create a responsive mobile optimized version of my website?
Yeah, my take, like what you said about bounce rate, I don't completely disagree with. I don't know how much they pay attention to it from the standpoint. And the reason I say that is, we've all done this. How many times have you gone to a website to get a phone number and then you leave? Yeah. And in that, in instances like that, it served its purpose. You did a search, you went to the website, you called the phone number, that's all you needed. So I'm not going to say it's not a ranking factor in any way, shape, or form, but I don't know how much weight they put on it. And with AMP, Google cares about load time. They don't care whether or not the page is an AMP page. Matter of fact, they probably prefer it isn't, as long as your load time is good. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a good
Going
explanation
back to your comment about the bounce rate, and I agree with you. Like there are circumstances, and that's why you have to kind of SEO is not just like, hey, just focus on this one thing. No, it's
Right.
taking everything into
Yeah, I
consideration.
think dwell time is more important than bounce rate. I think
Right.
Google definitely pays attention to dwell time.
But where I disagree with that analogy you shared, Paul, is on mobile. So if you have a website and you should have your call to actions at the very top above, either in your header or above your navigational header, and you have a phone number, like the circumstance or the anecdote that you were sharing, like ideally somebody will click on the phone number, and that should be a live link to phone your business. And if that's true, that's not a bounce, that's a click through, right? So to me, that's where again, there are exceptions to the rule, but I think those, again, I'm just splicing hairs with you for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I think,
Piss you off, Ian.
yeah, I think, contextually looking at dwell rates and bounce rates in the context and how they relate to one another is got to be, I mean, it's like you said, Ian, it's not a one-dimensional thing that you're looking at.
Yeah. So an example is a lot of customers at one time only cared about total traffic volume to their website, right? That was the SEO metric that people cared about. And we still share that with our clients, but there's so much more to it than that, because you can attract a whole lot of traffic. Like we have a client who, just because of the content that they have on their website, they have some really good authoritative infographics that people across the world want, and it's in the dental field, and it's like dental charts that people are always looking for, but those aren't.
Sorry about that, folks. Not sure what happened.
Yeah, I just got kicked out.
Yeah, too.
I guess my quarters ran out.
Either that or you've sufficiently pissed off Google.
Anyway, all I was saying, I don't even know what I was saying now, but that was weird.
That was weird.
But
got booted off.
Something when you were talking about bounce rate, something that,
Yeah.
I think when Google says bounce rate isn't a ranking factor, they never reveal everything, give you a completely straight answer. I think what they mean is bounce rate by itself may not be a ranking factor, but bounce rate in conjunction with other things could very well be a ranking factor.
Yeah.
And that's something they never tell you. So, Ken, click-through rates and meta descriptions, we hear a lot about them. What does Google say about that?
Yeah, so a click-through rate is basically a ratio of the users who click on a specific link based on the total number of users who view that page. It's not a direct ranking factor, but it is an indirect factor because it is an indication of whether or not your web page or your content is satisfying user intent. And so from that perspective, yeah, I think it's definitely something you want to pay attention to, because it is a way to signal, is your website serving a purpose by helping somebody solve a problem and dealing with the intent that what they're looking for. Meta descriptions, again, this is HTML that you put on every page of your website, and if you don't, then you're missing an opportunity, and you're not taking care of the low-hanging fruit in the care and feeding of your website, and it's signaling to Google that, again, you don't care or you're just too lazy to do it. Is it a direct ranking factor? No, probably not. But again, I don't want to give any reason, especially an easy reason, to that may or may not be a factor. Why even take that chance? meta descriptions do serve a useful purpose too, because they show up underneath the search results when you're getting on the search results page. What's pulled in is the meta description that describes what is this page about, and it's often, I mean, if you write these and they're well crafted, they're going to help reinforce SEO if they're not misleading, and and they lead to clickbait basically, and people click on them and they immediately go to a page and they immediately bounce. Then it's probably not going to help you, right? But it's a great way to get a call to action and give people a reason to go ahead and click on my search result as opposed to the search result from another business that shows up. So you definitely want to do it. Is it a direct ranking factor? I don't think so. But the reality too is, just because you write a really great meta description doesn't mean that Google's going to use it. Google may choose to substitute or even rewrite the meta description based on what it thinks your page is about. But again, you should just be doing it. While it's not a direct ranking factor, I think it has a huge influence on the click-through rates to web pages, and it makes your content show up. I mean, again, it's representing your business in the search results page because it's highly visible piece of content. It's the first thing that people see about your business on a search results page in the organic listing. So even if it's not a ranking factor, pay attention to it. It's important.
And Ken, what happens if your page doesn't have a meta description? Describe that to people so that they understand what the alternative is.
Well, I don't know that I fully know that answer, but I mean, I know that Google oftentimes does substitute what it thinks is important, which may not be what you want it to be. It may miss an opportunity to get somebody to want to click on your link as opposed to another search result link that they find. So,
yeah, it's usually pulled from your page content, right? In some form. Like Google's not trying to make a really comprehensive and compelling meta description for you. And again, to me, I always look to how this works in the ad world, and your description that follows your headline is so important because, if you, and again, like you've talked about previously in this podcast, is that, why would you not do the things that could potentially help you? And again, it's about the user experience and creating a compelling call to action for people. So if you're not doing that and you're relying just on Google to do that, like I've seen some either almost blank ones for businesses, or just they don't make any sense, some of them, right? Like it's not that they're showing nonsensical data, but it's just more like information that Google felt should be there because there was a spot for it, rather than like, here's a compelling reason to click on this link.
Yeah. Well, and when you look at it from, using the reference point of how does Google look at it from an ad perspective, the meta description has a lot to do with the relevancy of what the page is about. And if you're going to get a bad quality score because your description on your ad doesn't match your headline and it doesn't match what's actually on the page when you deliver somebody to that page, why would it be any different, in an organic search result?
Yeah, if you don't put a meta description in there, Google's going to probably pull something, like Ian said, from your page copy, and you should definitely take the time to do it, like you said, Ken, because even if Google decides to rewrite it, just the fact that you took the time to do it is a signal to Google.
Yeah.
So, Ian, I figured you'd love this one. Schema. What is it, and does it help your rankings?
Yeah. So Ken talked about the meta description, and that's essentially kind of a part of, or layers of, a web page, right? So if you think about, you have the physical visualization that we all see of a web page, And we all, or most people understand that behind that physical representation is source code. In between those two, you kind of have this layer of what we would call metadata or microdata, which we can complete or fill in. It's hidden. People don't see this, but it can be placed in the page, in the source code. And it's important because, again, what Ken's talked about, signals, you're trying to create as many signals as possible to tell Google this page is relevant when somebody's searching for X, right? And so your schema, it's called schema markup. This is this layer of information that you can put there. You can say, this is our location. This is our the service that this page is about. This is our business name. This is our review rankings. There's all sorts of metadata, and it's really custom or tailored to the type of page that you're creating. So if you're creating a product page for e-commerce, there's a different type of metadata or schema markup that you would use if it's a service, or if it's about a book, or if it's about an author, whether it's a book author or just a blog author, right? So there's all sorts of metadata in the schema that you as a business, what's that? It can fill in.
Yeah.
And again, if you're not doing it, you're leaving opportunity on the table. And it absolutely has been confirmed that this is a ranking factor. Again, it's in the context of everything else. It's not confirmed from Google that it's a ranking factor, but it's absolutely anecdotally supported by, since its inception, and since, it's been on the radar of SEO. We know that Google likes it, and what Google likes usually impacts Google rankings. Because again, Google's a machine, and it's a smart machine, but it's trying to look for all of the relevant signals in order to send the most relevant search results to a searcher, so that you'll continue using Google, and that you'll see the ads, and that you'll pay Google for, or a business will pay Google when you click on an ad. So even though we're talking organic, it's all part of the bigger picture of Google's success.
Yeah, Schema helps Googlebot, which is the robot that crawls the web from Google, understand what your website's about. And just to confuse everyone, Schema is metadata about data. So give that some thought. I think this is a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Ken and Ian, thanks for your time, and thank you everyone for listening. And if you found this helpful and valuable, please share it. And Ian, take us out.
Until next week, folks, keep calm and mark it on.